Nice. 8 o'clock on the dot. Happy about my timeliness today. Well, we're going to let some people come in. I'm hoping, I mean, maybe it'll be, fix my hair here. Maybe it'll be 3 hours again, I don't know. Oh, hey, Gary. But who knows, really? I have a number of questions that have already been coming in this week that I was going to speak to, and then if there's more questions, I can get into it. Last time, we went into a broad array of different topics, and it was quite enjoyable for everyone, including myself, so this is why I'm here again. And many of those questions, the quality of them are quite nice. Just a demonstration of the level of where people are at, I feel, at this time. And one thing I've been reflecting on and speaking to is just the speed in which individuals are coming into, I guess, or at least being honest with themselves about what is the true desire at this time, and that's been maybe the theme for the past, year or two, really, as we've been all shifted through the circumstances of this planet into, maybe more alone time, more time for reflection, more time for really coming to a clear look at what is actually important. And I feel, at least from the broader array of what I've been sharing over this past while, many years now, but especially this past while, is looking to kind of refine with these topics what is really important. Getting ourselves to ask the question, who am I? Why am I here? And what really brings me to a level of clarity, peace, joyfulness, and love, because that's all that really matters. And through the recognition of the things in which do bring that or do reveal that, whether that's various practices or perspectives or teachings, then we can start to really focus the majority, if not all, of our attention upon living those as much as possible. And that's what it is. I mean, in the post that I made today, one thing that was interesting, and if you haven't read it, you can go and read it, and it was about this perspective of the full spectrum awakening. What does it mean to live a full spectrum awakening? Well, in simplicity, it's just recognizing that spiritual awakening is not just in this kind of lofty, unseen dimensional reality. It is inclusive of all dimensions of our lived experience, and recognizing all of them of having equal importance, due to the nature that if everything is made of the source, if everything is it, then essentially everything can be looked at or acknowledged and explored as a spiritual practice, or a practice that will deepen our level of joyfulness and peacefulness, etc. So that may take many routes and many paths for each of us. But coming back to what I wanted to speak to you about this, which was in the comments today of that post, what was brought up very clearly in the comments was the understanding of coming into a place of true self-honesty, honesty with ourselves about where we're at, honesty with ourselves about particular decisions or directions on the path. And obviously we're speaking to the V topic in regards to what is the true reason why someone would want to take it, etc. But if we relate this idea of self-honesty to the entirety of our experience, it's really just taking a look at for instance, how is our body actually? How is our mind actually? How is our feeling state actually? How is our soul or our spirit actually? Like what is the reality of where we're actually at versus where we would like to imagine ourselves to be, or where we think we are, or just like through the fog of the many different rationalizations, justifications, reasonings as to why we may or may not be doing anything in particular. And the beauty of just coming into a reflection in this way, in a very simple way, which can be done through meditation, through journaling, through just sitting, maybe even talking to someone, we can just simply get real with exactly, again, what actually is versus what is being lived as a fantasy on top of what is, or as an imagination on top of what is. And the reason why that practice can often be avoided, or a practice that is so important but yet forgotten, is because of the pain that comes with humility, coming into a humbling as to our level of our health, let's say, or do we actually feel content with our experience, or do we feel peaceful the majority or of the time, or not? Right? Our relationships with people, places, and things. This could be another, there's many forms of how we can explore this. But it was just interesting that was a common topic, in the comments, and what people, it was only like, I literally had, a very long write-up, and it was literally one small paragraph that I spoke to that, and that was a number of the comments were around that piece, and I definitely would have to agree, in this dynamic. So yeah, that was something that stood out to me. Again, for those coming in, if there's questions or what have you, we can explore it. Like I said, that's the last one. If you haven't watched the last live I did, it's 3 hours, so I don't really expect people to want to go through all of that. But if you do have the courage, or you do actually just go through and start scrolling, oftentimes, if you're following the trust of inner guidance, when you just press that scroll button to random spots, you often will find yourself at places that are right for you, or meant for you in regards to what you need to hear. In the video I'm recommending, or any video on anywhere, I've had so many experiences where that happens, just like when you open a book in Chapters or somewhere, the bookstore, and it comes right to the page that you need. It's the same when we're working with internet forms and multimedia, and I'm sure many of you have already seen that through the nature of guided synchronicity, but also through the advancement of the algorithms, which, on one end we could say the algorithms that we're facing on social media are to sell us more things, or to manipulate our direction, or whatever. But on another level, it also is the technological reflection of the inner synchronicity and guidance that we are experiencing. Technology is a reflection of us. It's not a master of us. We have to remember that. So all technology is made in the reflection of God, and the highest technology of God is this body, this human body. So we don't need to fear technology or anything. It's just a funny thing, I feel like, when we speak to that, right? But one thing also that I'll touch on, because I received questions just before this, actually, in regards to the story series that I posted today about my experiences with marijuana, and just a deeper, detailed explanation as to why my perspectives are very clear about the dynamics of psychedelic use for spiritual awakening and development, and how they are essentially a no-go for at least anything I would recommend. And often I use the example of the fact that all of the great masters and enlightened ones that I've come across, that I learned from on my path, often reflected the same sentiments as I do, and they shared the same things, due to the nature of what we're dealing with on this planet at this time. But if people have more questions on that topic, I can get into. But if you haven't read the story feed on all of the details I laid out about my experiences with marijuana and the relationship of psychedelics on the path, then just go read that, because it'll probably answer a lot of things. Now, one question I did get that is really relevant, that I think is also relevant to a myriad of different topics, is how do we let something go that we know is not so conducive for our path, or potentially we're addicted to, right? And all of us, including myself, our bodies are addicted to many things due to the nature of chemistry. And fundamentally, 99% of us, if not all of us, are addicted to food, right? Addicted to thinking, addicted to a myriad of potential substances or chemicals, habits, ways of being, belief structures. It's just addiction is just more so, a better word would be a compulsion, an unconscious compulsion, right? Where the body and the mind and the fabric of the emotional and energetic networks have been they manifested in a particular way, and because they've manifested in that particular way many times for a very long time, then that creates obviously particular habits, and in this case compulsions or addictions, whatever term we're using. So the nature of us letting go from any particular habit or something in which naturally the depth of the soul is guiding away from or guiding in a different direction, where it's clear that what's being engaged in is not supportive for the growth or the development of your spiritual ascent, embodiment, level of well-being, coming into a physical immortality, these types of things. There's naturally going to be that inner guidance, and so the inner guidance will speak in many layers and in many ways. But if we were to look at, say, things that are more physical, because someone was asking, okay, well, I'm addicted to marijuana, because the majority of those who use it are addicted to it, whether they want to acknowledge that or not. How do we deal with that, right? Like, how do we let go of it? And the key understanding when it comes to, firstly, even if we're just not looking at the chemistry aspect, is recognizing that something's going to fall away like a leaf off a tree when something else is there to replace it that's better, equal to or better, right? In regards to the state of being that's being experienced. Because the only reason why essentially we're addicted to anything is because, or there's a compulsive action to anything, is because the state in which we experience when we engage with said thing is better than the consistent state that we feel we are naturally like attuned to, right? So often we may have lived a life that has had many addictive cycles, so that we don't necessarily even know what ground is. We don't even really know what peace actually feels like. And I remember actually there was a period of my life where I was just starting to taste the fruit of what peace actually is. And it was in the summer of 2016. And that was for the first time I had ever really actually tasted what peace felt like. I had many meditations, but I'm talking more of like a macro, like throughout the day, or over a couple days. So that was a very eye-opening experience, because I saw that the majority of the 20 plus years that I had been living, I mean at that point when I was 26, my life was just a perpetual rat race of adrenaline. Everything was just this constant addictive cycle of highs and lows. And I was speaking to this a lot this week about the drama, right? I see it everywhere. I see it in even, well-known like personal development people, where one day they're posting everything is great and peaceful and loving, and the next day they're in this world of emotional turmoil. And I'm not saying that that's a negative thing. Everyone has a valid experience, but of course, if we are presenting ourselves as someone who's guiding this, it would be nice that we would be an example of a place where we're in a more consistent stability, right? At least I would expect that out of someone that I'm learning from. And essentially that's what we tend to find, the more we're clear about that, right? But what I'm speaking to here is recognizing that in the intensity of those addictive cycles, you may not actually even know what the natural state or the essence of true peace actually feels like. So it's just this never-ending drama of highs and lows, this roller coaster, and constantly getting a new hit, right? And so we've been conditioned to think addictions are with substances or more extreme things, but if we understand that the addictive compulsive nature to constantly look to manipulate the experience into something better, that comes in the form of many different things. From lately I've been really noticing the checking the phone on social media. That's a chemistry one that's been rooted in a lot of us, including myself. It could be the food, it could be the need for intimacy, it could be I don't know, the need to start thinking about something that doesn't even matter. There's a very broad array of how those addictive cycles come in. Now, when we're looking at how we are letting something go, right? Again, we have to understand that if we're in a consistent oscillation or a frequency of peacefulness, of joyfulness, or of the desired state, the desired frequency, that engagement in a particular substance or tool or compulsion gives you, or apparently gives you, then that's naturally when the thing is going to be let go of, if we're able to already consistently experience that, right? It's kind of like thinking like, often we eat when we're not even actually hungry, when our body doesn't even need food. But say we're in a good place with this, and we're just eating even though we're not hungry. Well, it's like that naturally wouldn't happen when we're clear about things, because we know, okay, well, I'm okay. It's like someone offers you food, you're like, well, I'm good, right? So in the same way that that will happen in a very simple stance. The addictive cycle to, say, marijuana, or the addictive cycle to, any other tool or substance or thing that perpetuates this need to get into some higher place, essentially to avoid a lower place. This is only going to be circumvented when there is a consistent sense of a natural state where that, again, the frequency we are looking to experience is already there. So we have to replace it with something. So for me, when I dissolved my relationship with that tool, I went very deep into very intensive, long amounts of hours of meditation. Right, I was doing Kriya spinal breathing and various other forms initially, and then it transferred into more self-inquiry, Vipassana, or the awareness method that I teach, and that's on my website. These processes of meditation were the replacement. It was like my new addiction. Meditation became the new addiction, and meditation essentially can become an addiction. It's just that if we're addicted to things that are more natural to who we are and to our natural emanation in this body, like the breath and the elements and all that, it's not so much an addiction anymore as much as it is just a revealing of what we're actually truly desiring. It's like recognizing that, that's why I loosely use the term addiction, because if we understand, like we went into in the last live, which I'd recommend to watch, if we understand that every desire is the desire to know source, to know the absolute source of all, which is our true identity, then we can understand that everything that we do is essentially just to come to know that source. We're looking to get closer to source. You see? Now, because we live in this body and the chemistry of this body, shifts things quite drastically. If we are getting ourselves involved in things that are not going to bring us closer to that source, but we have this illusionary belief that it will, that's when we can get caught up in the cycles of addictive nature, where we're involved in something that isn't really conducive to actually coming into authentic connection with source and a knowing of that within our true self. Instead, it's this illusionary world or imagination that we're getting caught up into. And this is what I was sharing, a bit about my journey with marijuana and psychedelics recently, in regards to the journey of awakening. That a lot of people running around using psychedelics, having all these great experiences, think they're much farther along the path than they actually are. And that was a huge part of my humbling journey. It was very painful to come to recognize, because in that space that you are. And like I said, it's not just psychedelics, it's all the things that create the bliss chasing experience. It's this constant bliss chasing for this higher and higher transcendental experience that essentially is not respecting the lower chakras, for one, and essentially that's what it is. It's the movement of energy into the higher chakras and the forgetting of the fact that you have a lower dimensional physical experience that's here. And so what tends to occur with that is that we have to look at the chakras essentially as the filter by which we live our experience. So if we look at the chakras as a harmonious, holistic working that has, it's not so much their opening or closing, but the energy can be damaged or blocked in certain ones versus open and flowing in others. So if we have a bunch of higher chakras that are extremely open and a bunch of lower chakras that are very closed or damaged, then what tends to occur is the way that one perceives or filters their experience is through this imbalanced lens. So the imagination that gets created through, say, the third eye that's just beaming and all of the higher feelings and loftiness and all that, which is often what the hippies get, kind of, I wouldn't say made fun of us, but that's the common joke about the hippies, just lofty, not really grounded, not really known. They're kind of just in a daze in the imagination. Not to say everyone who uses psychedelics is like this, but or bliss chasing is like this, but it's often. And I remember actually we have a Indian guru following in this city in Ottawa. It's actually Sri Chinmoy, and it's really interesting. They have 2 restaurants in the city, and when you go to them, pretty much everyone who works at these restaurants or the crystal shop, they're very they're not grounded at all. That there's this real loftiness, right? Like there's this real they're not even there, and they're very nice and peaceful, just very sweet beings, but it's like they're not there. And this is often a product of what happens when, firstly, there's not a living, people are following a lineage or a series of teachings that doesn't have the living master still there. So there's no real living master or being that is there to guide anything. It's just a bunch of teachers, which is fine, but this is what happens. And secondly, it's common a lot in some of the yogic traditions that this will be the case, because again, there is still these forms of bliss chasing that don't have other dynamics or practices at play. So what I'm getting to here is that, again, if we're living through an imbalanced chakra system and the filter is happening in that way, then we are going to be living through a fantasy. There is going to be a huge imagination that is constantly happening. And I was actually having a discussion with my friend this week, Ali, and we were speaking to, I was speaking actually, and I'm going to make a post about this, I severely rolled my ankle 2 months ago, which was actually a great lesson for me in this regard, because I hadn't done anything like that in a very long time. And I tore a bunch of ligaments and I fractured it, and I did all the healing on my own. Didn't go to the doctor, didn't go to the hospital, didn't do anything. I dealt with it all with myself, and Ali actually helped me because he does this work. And one thing that was very clear in this healing, it's about 90% now, which this injury probably should be taking about 6 months to even longer for it to really get back, especially to where it's at now. But it took me just under 2 months. And the reason why a lot of that happened, at least my humble perspective of it on it is that there was a respecting of the physical dimension first and foremost. So it's not like I'm just meditating on it getting better and singing to it and doing affirmations and doing all these things that are only on the energetic or higher dimensional realm to heal a physical ailment. I'm focusing first on the physical aspects, doing movement, recognizing that the old rice method is bullshit. It's actually completely different. It's almost the opposite. What else? Oh, I was using my urine, soaking in urine. It's actually a common practice to help with ailments. What else was I doing? Hot and cold therapy. I fasted for 10 days the moment I injured it. All the things that are physically based first. Then, on top of that, all the spiritual workings, the meditations, the affirmations, the sound therapy, all the things that will support that. But there is a clarity of recognizing that we cannot, just because we're living as spiritual beings and we are these angelic humans and we're remembering this, etc., doesn't mean miracles are just expected to happen all the time. Like you're going to be walking on water and defying gravity and healing broken bones with your hands and all this shit. This happens, yes, but it happens when the physical dimension is respected, right? It happens when we've come to ground ourselves in the reality of where we're at, which is this body, and this is where we're here, and we're living, and we're existing in this realm, and that we can, even though we may awaken to the natural state and reveal that we can dissolve suffering, it doesn't mean pain will not be there, because it was surely very painful what I experienced, but it wasn't a thing. It wasn't this big drama. I'm not like posting on everybody about it and telling I'm just doing it. I'm taking care of what I got to take care of. So that was a really beautiful reflection that I had with Ali about that, because it just helped reiterate what I'm sharing to you right now, which is, again, it's just a self-honesty piece, being actually honest with where we're at, where we've come to, where we're headed, and what are the tools or practices that are required for us to continue to navigate in a positive direction. Yeah? So I'm going to go back in the comments because I know there's quite a few of them. Balance is important, sure is. Maybe there's some questions. I haven't smoked weed in almost 6 months, feeling really good. That's awesome. Good to hear. Let's see here. There's 2 questions. Is it something you've been through many times? But in one of your stories, a woman talks about psychoactives do DNA damage. I'm about to do a journey. Yep, DNA damage, DNA compaction is what it's called. I'm assuming the occasional use can bring health or help align and clean conditioning patterns from the character. Do you agree? Well, I like I said last time when we conversed about this, I said I wouldn't be doing them. So that's what it is, right? Obviously, someone could say, well, I'm far along on the path on some regard. I've been at this for a long time. I feel a sense of peace, so I wouldn't need to do them. But that's not how it works. We need to understand that when we hear the teachings of a great teacher, master, enlightened one, or whatever that we look to, and we receive their teachings, what they're speaking to is both a teaching and a practice. They're not teaching from an endpoint that you cannot also experience now. They are literally teaching what is now what can be now for anyone who humbles themselves to those teachings and practices them as a practice, right? It's like the golden rule is both a description of reality, meaning the golden rule is a description of the non-dual reality of existence, meaning to treat another as you desire to be treated means I and the other are one and the same. The other does not exist. All is the self. There is only the self. That's what the golden rule is describing. It's a description of reality, the absolute reality. So the golden rule is the absolute teaching. It's also the most basic entry-level teaching, because to practice being nice to people is the most simple, basic thing anyone can do. I was laughing actually yesterday because I went for a walk on solstice in a nature area that I've been in, and it's really been supportive of my journey. And we were walking on a trail with my dog, and I was just I'm in a good mood most of the time, but I was just like really focused on the people that were passing by me for some reason. Everyone that was passing by me I was smiling at, and they were smiling back. And it was just such a blissful experience. Like to meet a stranger with a smile and they meet you back with a smile is more blissful than the 90% of the personal development retreats and courses and practices and all these ceremonies and rituals and all these things all piled up into one. It's the most fundamental, quickest experience that we can enjoy, experiencing the depth of intimacy and love with a complete stranger through just sharing a smile. So we have to get real with ourselves about the reality of how simple this path can be, and that the majority of us delay our realization because of how complex we like it to be, or how complex we make it, because we do not listen, right? This is very important, because again, if we look at all the great masters, all the great teachers, what are the consistent practices they teach? They teach the golden rule, they teach meditation, they teach living by moral principle, right? They teach potentially breath work, potentially times of less, right? Minimalism, simplicity, not talking too much, fasting, right? Silence of mind, which is just meditation. All of the teachings are the same in every tradition from any enlightened being. None of them are going to be telling you to go do psychedelics. None of them. So anyone can do what they like. And if we're looking for experiences, if we're looking for different forms of healing, maybe that could do it. I'm not saying that it's not going to heal it, but it's not going to bring you to an authentic state of true authentic awakening or non-dual realization, or true expanded embodiment of your multidimensional self. It will not bring you there. It will only continue to create the illusion that that's what's happening, or the illusion that healings are occurring, or the illusion that, or maybe the reality that yes, small things have occurred, but now you got to deal with something else, right? The topic of DNA compaction is a very real topic, and this is pretty much everything I just went into, where when you have damaged lower chakras and higher open chakras that create an experience that it's a very painful experience. That's all I got to say. In the long term, it's very painful. It just delays things in a really not so fun way, right? So I can only speak to you from where I'm at. I can speak to you from my experience. I can speak to you to what I'm doing or what I would do now. Each person has to do and do as they like. But I often, some of my teachers actually wouldn't work with me if I was using psychedelics, and I'm at that point more and more, to be honest, because all the work that we may get into, and the guidance or the transmission of the energy or the meditations or the detox or the things that are being guided, it's like so much of that is potentially erased, or we backtrack, and it's just wasted time, right? And for me, I have a lot of time, but I don't have time to deal with that. What helped you get on on your withdrawals? Okay, I'll speak to that specifically, because obviously I just went into a whole spiel about how to let go of things, and how to recognize that things will only fall away when something else has replaced it that's of equal or higher value. So, for instance, if you devote your time to like an hour of meditation a day, and we're speaking to like deeper self-inquiry, vipassana, like very focused styles of meditation, not just like listen to some guided, some guided are good. Obviously I can say that my meditations are good, but there are others that I actually would say are really good. But I'd say 90% of the guided meditations out there I wouldn't pay attention to. But there are definitely a portion, those that are, again, authentically awakened. I mean, you can, I can point them out to you, because I've spent a lot of time in that, trying to find who was that. My old teacher Ramaji had calibration scales for all the popular teachers that are out there now, and there's many other ways. But it's just recognizing, like, we have to, when we're doing meditations, we don't want to be playing around. We want to really focus in and use that hour wisely, right? So if we're spending that time to really do some authentic self-inquiry, vipassana, or awareness practice, and we're really diving deep, within a very short period of time, you're going to start experiencing very deep levels of peace and joyfulness within yourself. That is going to replace the other practices and tools that tried to get you to that, or were getting you there, maybe inorganically, right, at times, or getting there for a little bit and then dropping you down. That's when things start to fall away, right? The other thing is recognizing that we have to understand the intention or state that we're in when we're wanting to use particular things. It's like, for me, if I want to go eat, oftentimes I'm either not engaging in an intimate experience with someone, or with nature, or with myself. It's usually when I'm maybe not being so present in myself. I'm very rarely, if ever, actually hungry. It's mainly an emotional space, a space of boredom, the chemistry in the body that wants another addictive hit of food, because it's very much a drug. There's many like layers and spaces to that. But when we start to recognize this, then at least we may still engage the actual thing we're going to engage in, but we can do it from a deeply loving and contented experience, like where we maybe do a quick meditation before. And we sit with that, and we engage that practice or that thing in a very slow and loving and devotional manner, and not just doing it to escape reality, right, or to jump ahead of the wave, right, to kind of get that relief hit. That will also help dissolve the relationship with that particular tool, because you will start to see that, well, if what you thought was just going to give you the peace, but now you're already in that peace because you just meditated for 5 minutes, then, well, what's the real purpose to now go into that? It's like before you eat a meal, do maybe 12 to 36 deep breaths, and really sit with yourself, and really allow for the body to sit and wait. And it's likely that you may not eat as fast, you may not want to eat as much, you may not even want to eat at all, right? So if we just replace with these very simple practices, you may start to find that there's a very clear difference in your experience, and your experience with particular tools. Now, I mean, meditation is always the number one, but like getting into the elements, getting into the waterfalls near your place, sunbathing, sun gazing, really breathing in the air. I love when it's like windy or there's like a thunderstorm and you're just kind of like breathing in the energy. Obviously, like bare feet as much as you can, especially if in the summertime. These are all ways that will help with the withdrawal symptoms, but one of the ways that is going to be really powerful is continuing on the path of physical detox and the fasting protocols that I speak to often. This is, when you take a hit of marijuana, it's going to be in your system for at least 6 months. So understand that the process of detox is going to have to start clearing that out. I actually know somebody, I don't know him personally, I remember watching a video about him, and I think he did a 40-day water fast, and he was sharing about how he had a previous phase of a lot of cocaine and hard drugs, and at a certain phase of the detox on that water fast, he started actually getting high again like he was on cocaine, because what's happening is that the cocaine that's in your body is literally releasing, right? And it's releasing and it's getting you high again. So this is the reality of what happens when we're detoxing, is we're getting rid, and the pain that we had to go into, the pain that we put in is the pain that's going to end up coming out, right? Or the energy of what we took in, when it's coming out, it's like we're facing the same energy, we're like completing that cycle. So that's why withdrawal is such a, it's such a painful experience, but a very worthwhile process, due to the nature of what we have to face as we engage through that, as we navigate through that dying, right? And it took me many times to learn that lesson, especially with marijuana, because I cycled through it so many times and I experienced the same deathly withdrawal every single time, until you just you're just done with it, right? So sometimes it takes, some dark nights for that to be experienced. I recently did a sweat lodge. It was very healing and detoxing. Might do it again. Yeah, sauna can be very helpful. Just understand, it always starts and comes back to what we're consuming. Sweat lodge, sauna, all that, steam, it's only going to be as helpful to the degree in which we are opening up those channels, right? Because what is the skin? It's the third kidney. So the skin being the third kidney has to be open, and it's only going to be open when we have started to change our consumptive patterns so that it's higher water content, potentially more raw, not always, but higher water content, least periods of some juice fasting or water fasting, if not dry, but starting to give the body the open space so that it can eliminate through the lymph, clear the colon, clear the intestines, clear the kidneys, clear the liver, clear the gallbladder, all of that. So as all of that starts to clear, then when you start to go into a sweat lodge or you do a sauna, oh man, everything starts to open up, right? So I'm also juicing in mainly plant-based, exactly, right? The more that's open, the more that will be a very helpful experience, and the quicker that healing happens. I did a cupping session recently during the dry fast, and I actually had some pretty intense marks on the higher back because I've been sitting on my computer writing a lot, and I just felt I've had this long back injury, but it heals so quickly. It usually takes a couple of weeks to get rid of those cupping things, but it's pretty much all gone in less than a week, even less shorter, I guess, and that's simply because lymph is moving, right? If lymph is moving, toxins can move. And we're good. Hey Ryan. So I'm just going back to see if I missed any questions. If there's any more, hopefully I answered. I touched on a couple questions there. I haven't spoke to human design too much, and I did want to mention a couple things about that, so we can get into that, but I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. So I covered the DMT, whatever question. Yeah, and it's like, it's pretty clear for me because, and I speak to this often, I don't recommend using psychedelics for spiritual growth because I have a million other recommendations I can give that are far better. They may not be as quick as you like, or remember, quick as what is perceived, because you sitting and doing a week of an hour meditation may not give you this blown open experiences, but in the long term, it's going to provide you with a way stronger foundation versus that blown open experience that, firstly, you may not even be able to integrate maybe 5% of what comes in on that one experience. Second, when the energy comes down and really comes down, the majority of that is kind of gone, right? Because when you're shooting up into the higher experiences, you may gain a reference point, but that doesn't mean you're stabilizing in that frequency. So when you come back down, you're having to face the real downturn. Now, this is no different than when you're doing meditation. It's just that the meditation process is going to be, you're going to be more conscious of that entire process, and it's not going to fluctuate so drastically. And because it doesn't fluctuate so drastically, you can actually get your footing. It's like if you tried to walk a tightrope across, and you just try to sprint across it. You're likely going to get farther quicker, but what's the chances of you actually making it to the end versus if you really took your time? Right? Really took your time and really was present with each step, and you really went, right? And even if you fell off going slower, you probably still be able to catch yourself and get back up and keep going, right? So it's a very clear example that I'm giving here. And like I said, it may be different for everyone, but I don't know, it's pretty clear. Is cupping good for lymphatic draining? Yeah, it can be. It can be really good. It's not necessary, though. I wouldn't say it's necessary. It just helps on some level. I've started juicing. Somehow my body asked for it. Yeah, 100%. Naturally, again, understand, when we're releasing the physical toxicity, we're also releasing we're releasing weight, physical weight, right? The weight of the toxic buildup, the colon buildup, the fecal matter, all of the stuff. We're also releasing the weight of our belief structures and our mental faculty, right? All the belief structures that are just holding weight, literally, because remember, thoughts have actual physical mass. So when you meet someone that's really dense in their belief structures about something, it's like you can feel the density of that. There is weight. So we're releasing the weight of the mental structure. We're also releasing the weight in the emotional space, right? And then of course on the energetic, the miasmic buildup on the energetic level, right? That is holding weight. So we're becoming lighter on all ways. So that's going to reflect, of course, in the physical. It doesn't always, but like I said in my post today, this is the time for a full spectrum awakening. Spirituality is not just being this like lofty, in this transcendental space. It's the full. It's not even spirituality. It's just complete full spectrum human living, angelic human living. That is the nature of what we're speaking to. The eternal, immortal, angelic human that knows all, has balanced all, has come into the knowledge of all. That's what we're speaking to. We're not saying this perfected idealism, because we're all on the path and we're, it's just oscillation. But that's essentially where we're unfolding to, which is now. The destination is here. Plus, DMT is endogenous, and the gentle process ultimately leads to the same conclusions of plant medicine. Very on point, Ryan. That's exactly it. It certainly does lead to the same experiences, because for me, I feel like I'm on a trip all of the time. Like a day is a year. Like I'm sure many can relate to this. Like one day is a year. There's so many things that happen. I walk down the street, I have like so many different things that run through my perspective. Or just experience, and it's just like nonstop. But I feel grounded within it all. I can actually engage with it, versus like being like knocked out cold potentially because it's too much. It's like the example I gave, right? Like giving a Ferrari to a child. It's a nice car, but what use of it is to the child? Did juice fasting make you feel? One second. Did juice fasting make you feel more clarity to your thoughts, thinking patterns? You're asking how did you feel? Well, how do you feel? That'd be interesting, because you're doing it. But yeah, for me, it's like juice is an everyday thing. I juice. I don't juice every day, but I juice probably every second or third day. But I drink juice every day, and it's just a fabric. It's just like a staple in my experience, and it's just I don't know how to describe it. It's so amazing. I still eat, obviously, but less and less, to be honest. I mean, liquid, to live off liquids long term seems to be in the cards now, as the next stage towards more consistent dry fasting, on this breatharian path. I'm not attached to being a breatharian in any sort of way. I just know it's kind of an inevitability at this point. So whatever the timeline is, doesn't matter. But if we're listening to the body, and often when I'm listening to the body, my body wants liquids or light, if anything, foods or meals. Sometimes I'll go for things, but something maybe cooked. I'm not like 100% raw or anything, but it's just rare, and often I feel a little bit lethargic after. I want to sleep. Even with plant medicines, balance is important. The chakras are possibly misaligned, which causes the reliance on certain medicines. That's correct too, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, the juices is nice, and it's just listening. I mean, if you guys didn't, it was just before this at 7 p.m., but my friend Jason just uploaded a recent podcast. I'd say it's a little bit more beginner level, because I kept it that way just based on knowing what his audience was. But like I said, like the golden rule teaching is the most beginner level teaching and the most advanced teaching you could possibly speak to. So, we shouldn't really differentiate, to be honest. But what I was speaking to in that, which was, I think I lost my train of thought, because I was going to talk about something really, the listening, right? Listening is everything. Me and Ryan, actually, last time we were speaking to this about the importance of listening. It's everything. Like, if you just listen to the body and the environment of your surrounding, you're listening to yourself. Because once you realize that everything is you, or everything is the manifestation of the absolute source, then you recognize that someone else speaking or you speaking is the same thing. So everything that manifests within your reality that you're listening to, be it actual listening or listening through the receptivity of symbology and synchronicity and the speaking of the body, let's say, which essentially it's all you, because it's all the anatomy of God. So within the anatomy of God, if we're listening to our anatomy and how it's speaking to us, we'll be able to read the code very clearly, right? And receive the guidance as to the direction or how we're unfolding, et cetera, in a really, balanced way. Full mirror, right? Where it essentially, even more detailed than that, it's not even this experience. The way I don't experience it as like a projection and a reflection. I just experience everything as it. everything is it. So if everything is it, you actually directly experience everything as yourself, with no separation, no sense of separation. Of course, there's a potential physical sense of that, and apparent sensational experience of that, but there is the feeling that everything is the absolute it. Everything is it. The cup of coffee, or the cup of coffee, whatever I said there. Even though I don't drink coffee, so I don't know why I'm saying that. The clouds, the child, the puppy, the piece of paper, it's all it. And this was also reflected with me and Ollie the other day, where I was saying that the dream for the commoner, I guess all of us, is like to live the movie. We all attracted to movies because in a movie, even the most mundane of scenes in the movie are still a part of the purpose of the movie. They have a purpose. So essentially the desire of living that is to recognize the natural desire to have even the most mundane of experiences in our life to be a part of a grander purpose, to be felt as it, right? Where every moment is it. Every moment is the absolute. So if every moment is the absolute, if every moment is it, then what does it matter? Here or there, this or that, coming and going, past or future. It is all it. Do we see? So if that's the case, then everything is redeemed. The grimiest of the gunk and the highest of the high is all redeemed as it. There's no difference. That is what it means to live in the absolute nature, the natural state. And it's the most simple thing, really. Right? It's the most simple thing. There's actually no it's the most absolutely simple thing that the mind can't even conceive. And this does not it does not make you into someone who just has no perception of right or wrong, or what righteousness is. There isn't a personal agenda behind the need to call out unrighteousness. There is just a natural tendency to do that, like you would pet a puppy if they came to you. There's nothing to it. So to call out what is untrue is just the nature of how you are. It's not anything. There's nothing to that. That is what is an interesting topic when you have a lot of these teachers speaking on this idea of like false light, running around speaking about false light. And oftentimes they'll speak, oftentimes those types of teachers who listen to me speak to something like this, they will, because they don't have a grasp of what that is, they may go into that thing like, oh, that's a false light teaching. But it's because you're not actually experiencing what it is that I'm pointing to, right? If you haven't actually experienced it, like if non-duality is just a concept in your mind, then yes, you're going to believe that when I say something that everything is it, everything is the absolute, then you're going to say, well, what about the child that's getting murdered? It's like always these extreme examples that are being given. But that's just not how it's experienced. That's absolutely not how it's experienced. Because to live in the way I'm describing is to see everything for exactly what it is. So for instance, like if someone's coming to you with, sadness and they're feeling, all this, you're not going to come to them with all the stuff, like all these beliefs about what they're going through, and you're going to see it exactly for how it is and what it is. And often you can just be silent, and accept them, give them a hug, be with them. Maybe there's something to say, maybe there's not, but what greater way to love someone or something than to simply see it or them or the situation for exactly what it is, which is the absolute, and simultaneously exactly as it is appearing. As gross and ugly and as sad and painful as it's appearing, that's what it is. And that's how we see it, that's how we experience it, that's how we engage it. You see? So I hope that's clear. But I think this is where individually comes into the field. It's like we all have parts of the fabric to iron out, so we bring inconsistencies to the table. Correct. And at the same time, each of those inconsistencies are still seen as it, when that's actually true, right? Like, we can still go through the path of our individual, co-creative expression and simultaneously know who and what or we are as it, as that, absolute source. Because it's paradoxical. Both can be simultaneously true, right? Just like I speak in a particular way, I have certain tendencies and things and, demeanors, and someone else is completely different, but yet we may speak to the same thing, right? Sorry to beginner question, but back to Ryan for a moment. That was great. Some great pieces there. Thanks for igniting that. There was a question before this that I wanted to just address. Does masturbation or too much masturbation drain the energy of organs? If so, which organs? Well, masturbation in itself may not necessarily drain the organ system, but the release of the semen can potentially do that, obviously. So why is this? Well, firstly, it takes about a pint of blood to create one ejaculation. So that's a lot of blood. Secondly, there's a bunch of actually different memes out there that show the actual details of how much goes into creating semen and how long it takes. I think it takes about 72 days for a full creation of it to happen. And, many other things. Obviously, popular teachings, Montauk Chia will talk about certain cycles of this and that. So I have a number of different perspectives on this that I think could be very helpful to everyone here. So I'll go into them, both male and female, because some females may have a male partner or engage with friends who are male, so it's going to be helpful. But also the way that I'll explain it, it will apply to both. When we understand the nature of our orgasmic or the nature of the orgasm, and we understand it first from the physical kind of primal lens, or even on the path when we're maybe bliss chasing, there's still a natural recognition that much of that bliss chasing actually stems from the perpetuation of the desire of the orgasm, because that is the most fundamental, primary form of bliss chasing. Or I wouldn't call it bliss chasing, but it is that. But let's just say the way we experience heightened states is through the orgasm. So when we come into an authentic awakening and go through the stages of that, where we start to experience the true natural self, we start to experience a consistent sense of peace, love, and joyfulness that doesn't fluctuate. So it's not dependent on the changing of states through experiences. It's the constant. It's like the stateless state, or the experienceless experience. That's how the true natural state or absolute state, in my experience, feels like. So it doesn't matter really the changing of the highs and lows of the experiences. That's why many of those things fall away. The orgasm is often one of the later things to fall away, if it does, or it's not so much fall away as it is a transmutation. That's more important. That's more accurate. So I've spoken to this before, and I actually made a nice post about the sacred sexuality, where I know on my path I was oscillating between the extremes of multi-orgasmic practices, wanting to have many orgasms multiple times, retain the scene but still have an orgasm, that type of thing. Or on the other side, long bouts of celibacy or semen retention, right, which is more common, like no-fap and these things. So often there's an oscillation between the two, especially in the male body, or in the dynamic of a couple relationship, right? Where how are we dealing with this? We're either going to be celibate, not touch each other, or we're going to try and do this like expansive tantric thing. Now, the thing with this is both these extremes lead to dead ends, because on one end, there's still going to be a desire for intimacy and a desire to move the sexual energy, and if it's not being done in the copious amounts of various ways, then release will occur at some point, or it's going to end up manifesting in kind of aggressive tendencies. On the other end, you have this almost addictive-like cycle to multi-orgasmic energy, and that you see this all the time in the tantra scene. Everyone's just wanting to just do it all the time and do it with everyone, and it's just it's addiction to orgasm. So that doesn't lead it, because, and again, true love and intimacy will not be fostered with that, at least in the long term. So when we come to the balance of this, I spoke to what happens when this is balanced, and this is actually reflective in some teachings from Lao Tzu. Actually, it's not confirmed it was him, but it's in the Hao Hu Ching, which is the angelic dual cultivation, which is the practice of, which is similarly described as the style of sexual teachings called Karetsa, which is a style of sexual teaching that is on neither end, but right in the middle, where sexual union is done in a devoted partnership of love, where the sexual union is non-orgasmic focused. So both partners have renunciated or renounced the orgasm. They are no longer interested in the orgasm. They're interested in the exchange of the sexual energy and the movement of the lower energy to the higher, so that heightened states can be experienced and a true sense of divine union can be had. And this is certainly very profound. It's a very profound experience. And what happens here is that, firstly, it's not necessarily needed that there has to be the dual cultivation part, where there's two partners. This can be done alone. For instance, past couple weeks after this dry fast, all of that sexual energy had been naturally diffused, because that often happens during fast. But why does it happen? It happens because there is the most absolute devotion to love for the self that's occurring when you're fasting. At least, this is also the same with deep meditation, not just fasting. Fasting is like a meditation. But when we're working with both of these, we are devoted all of our attention upon ourselves. So there is no movement of attention out into things or into the lustful tendencies, or able to be triggered by other energies or beings that are feeding off that sexual energy, because that's very much a manipulation tool on this planet. That's no longer happening. So especially when we've released our consumptive pattern of the primary, which is food, that will not be triggering its partner in crime, essentially, which is the sexual movement, right? The desire for orgasm. If you're desiring, the pleasure from the foods, you're often going to be in the movement of the pleasure with the orgasm. They usually come together. It's not that they can't be separate or they can't move in their own timing, but at least in my experience, it's been quite profound. So in speaking to the cultivation of this energy back within, where we are not moving that energy out, we're coming it back within, all of that lower energy that wants to be released in both male and female. The thing is, with the female body, even though you're tempted easier, it's actually more difficult to control it for the female, because the detriment is lower. You're not going to feel drained. You're not going to be releasing your fluid, although you do have a fluid, and if you do release that can be detrimental. Whereas on the male body, it's a bit more difficult and more important, right? Because, I'll get into it in a minute. So both sexes, we're moving that energy into the higher space. We're experiencing the peacefulness, the natural peace and joyfulness, the rested clarity, not these intense blissful, just this rested clarity. And because of that, there isn't the intensive lustful movement for the orgasm, which is often the case. It's coming from a lustful energy. When we're in a deep loving connection, like through the Karetsa sexual practices, the lustfulness for orgasm just doesn't happen. It's more consistently dissolved, right? So this is very important. Now, I went through a variety of experiences with semen retention. Last year, I went through 2 bouts, about 5 months and 7 months, where there was no release on during those periods. And I mean, the level of joyfulness and peacefulness and love and etc. It's just there. It's always there. I started going through a variety of activations over the past few years, but specifically this past year and a half, that I was really refining it. It was taking me quite a long time to refine this. And that was the opening of what is traditionally called the Dantians in the Taoist tradition, but could be called different things in Keylontic science framework and that form of anatomy. But it's essentially, I've spoken to this before, it's like feeling an electric ball in your gut, in the lower Dantian, the lower energy. It's like feeling a sun-like radiance in your heart, and it's feeling like an orgasmic halo in your head. That's essentially what happens when you start activating these 3 points. When I was in long bouts of retention, the ability to hold these energies consistently, where like the sun all day, every day, may dim in sleep, and then I wake up, takes me a little while, maybe an hour, less, but then it's back. That would be far more consistent, right? So in the times where semen was lost or released, what would tend to happen is it would take me at least 3 weeks to build that energy back up, right? So not only in the physical dimension, I would be drained physically, and the energies would be very lower, but on the energetic level of the light body aspects, and the energetic, the chakras and all that, they would be drained as well in some regard, or at least in my mind, the connection between the two was so strong that I was essentially allowing for that to occur. So what happened was I went through an experiment where I started being able to lower the time frame. And what occurred with this was simply dissolving any belief structures I had around exactly what I'm sharing to you about, which is release of the seed or orgasm will diminish on some level other forms of our higher energies. So I was able to get it down to about 2 days, a day and a half. So from 3 weeks to 2 days. It's a very nice progression. This is a very advanced practice. I would not say that this is going to be possible for the majority of people. So that's why I wouldn't recommend being able to do it. And just because I can do that doesn't mean I'm advocating that we just release. I'm saying that anything within the physical space, this even relates with the fasting, it relates to if you smoke cigarettes, it really relates to anything on some level. You know, on some level, we do have the potential with our intention, our clarity to dissolve and to transmute potential downsides of things that we engage in. Does this give us the excuse to engage in whatever we want? I would say no. Someone else could argue that. But I would say, well, why make it more difficult on ourselves? Right? That would be it. Why make it more difficult on ourselves? Then instead to navigate our path with the utmost clarity and intention so that we're constantly building. Because it doesn't really matter whether or not I was able to activate a certain aspect of the light body, it still is a drain on the entirety of the energy system. Right? The entirety of the energy system is now going to have to go into and work to build that back up again. The other thing with it all is understanding just the energy of lust, just the understanding of the difference between lustfulness and love. And often, if we're getting into an experience where there is, you're asking about masturbation on male or female side, there often is going to be an energy of lustfulness that comes in there. Even if we're using it and saying, oh, it's a self-love practice, or we try and have no thoughts in our mind or fantasies, there can be a beauty to that on some level. At the same time, it's the same thing with what we spoke about earlier. When we start to experience the peacefulness, the natural peacefulness, the rested clarity within the natural state, many of these other types of practices will start to dissolve, right? The need for the peak experiences in any form, stemming back from the core, which is the orgasm, will all begin to dissolve and diminish. Naturally, not by force, but naturally, because you're already in it. You're already where you need to be. You're already where you could have, the highest of desires could possibly get you anyways. Right? And that's what I want each of you to know now. It's not like I'm saying this is what can be. This is what it is. And so if there's a recognition of this and an acceptance of that, which can be so, like, you can get demolished in love by that, like just tears coming out of your eyes of how of what we're speaking to here, like what a gift that is, right? To know that, not only for it to be true, but to know it as truth for yourself. Yeah. So that was quite a thing there. A good question. I mean, very, very important topic. And remember, it's not just male or female, right? It's both sides. And the consistency, again, like I said, the consistency of the level of your energies and the natural peacefulness that is always there is just going to be always there. And then if you're wanting to activate various forms of your light body, and like I said, these various energetic points that really start to expand things, then that's also possible. Right? But we have to understand the workings. For me, like, it was, I got so detailed. Just like in my old experience, like I talked about marijuana, all that, and why I say the things I do now about that phase. Well, it's the same with this phase that I'm speaking to, because I was so detailed in my journaling and my tracking of time, and how long things were taking, and how things cycled, how things would cycle, and perceptions or people, or, there's so many things I could speak to about it, but I don't know, I'll leave it there. There was another question I'll go back to. And there's more questions, just please. Ryan, you're bringing so much healing. Oh, I'm happy to hear that, man. Sorry, this is a beginner question. Do you have any inputs about sugar in juices, fruits, insulin spikes? What about protein? Okay. Yeah, it is beginner, but it's very important because we all come back to it. Sugar in fruits is fructose. It has to get translated into glucose for it to actually be useful to the body. That's very different than eating a piece of candy that goes straight into your bloodstream as glucose. It doesn't have to be transformed, right? It doesn't go through that chemical process. That's a very big thing, right? For the fruit to need to be translated versus it going straight into your bloodstream. Fruit is the optimal food for humans, period. Why? Because it is the only food on the planet. And remember, fruits is not just the fruits we think about. It's anything that is bared fruit by you not having to kill anything for it. That's nuts, that's fruit, veggie fruit, that is some vegetables, right, that you don't have to kill the plant. It's anything that is naturally bared as fruit from nature, right? Think about the intelligence of a fruit tree. Fruit tree grows the apples. If someone doesn't eat the apple falls down, rots, the seeds go, and another tree starts popping out. It's the most beautiful form of regeneration, right? So everything when it comes to the fruits, things that we don't need to kill an animal or plant for, which is the original Essene fruitarianism. Essenes were the mystical tradition of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus. Those are the hidden teachings of Jesus. The Essene fruitarianism is what I'm speaking to here, which is probably the most accurate way to describe how I eat most of the time. So when we look at fruits, they're just whole in themselves, right? They're whole in themselves. You just take them, you eat them, you throw it on the ground, and the seeds will just reproduce. It's the most natural, most beautiful process. And in other places in the universe where eating still does happen, oftentimes it's just fruit, and they just eat maybe like they eat an apple once a day or a couple of days. It's just so natural. It's a part of the natural ecosystem. Once you're really tuned in, you go into nature, sometimes you'll have these experiences where, you'll be walking and you'll have this like synchronistic thought about hunger or something, that you want something juicy, and then you walk around the corner and there's like a raspberry bush there, right? It's the most like natural, effortless process. Same with things like, small herbs or, smells, like the essential oils of nature. You have like doTERRA and all that, but think about the essential oils of nature that activate in certain combinations that are perfect for the ecosystem. Obviously, many of our ecosystems are manipulated, but we're speaking in more optimal terms here. That's often what happens, right? When we go in and we explore ourselves and nature in a natural way, in a fluid manner, and that's why it's so important to connect to the elements, because all the elements nourish us, right? Not just the foods, not just the liquids, the air, the ether, the fire, like the full spectrum, the negative charge of the earth. So when we're in communion with all of that, we're not thinking about so much what we got to eat. We got to get our protein in. We got to get that just doesn't happen. We're in the natural flow of our experience, and we're nourished by everything around us. So we're going to eat naturally from that space. Protein has only been popular literally for the past 30, 40 years, since big meat started taking over the industry. And what happened in conjunction since the 70s? Heart disease started going straight through the roof. Liver cancers and all these things. Why? Because the body can't handle the amount of protein that we're thinking and we've been indoctrinated to think we need. We need amino acids. Amino acids are required for the cellular process to unfold. Amino acids can be received from a Essene fruitarian diet, 100%. Right? It's all available, and even beyond that, the Breatharian perspective, which is often what I speak to, and I speak to it in balance because I know not everyone is even at the point of potentially considering that. But the perspective of Breatharian is that our bodies are a pharmacy in and of themselves. So we have the ability to produce everything that we need and everything we would want within ourselves. But the body needs the correct information for that to be activated. And this is why things like urine therapy are actually very powerful, which again, people jump all over that and think it's all toxic waste and all that. Firstly, nothing toxic. Well, we do live in a toxic space, so yes, often urine that we would have is toxic, 100%. But when we clear out, it becomes much less so, if not not toxic at all, and that's when it's come back to its natural state. Because the way that the body is designed, you wouldn't have a toxic substance coming out the same tube as the most sacred fluid in the body. What stupidity would that be? That's just not the case. We live in unnatural bodies now because we've not taken care of ourselves. We've not been taken care of by our forefathers and mothers in our society, and there's many different conversations with that, which I can get into if that's desired. But I'm just speaking to the idea of the inner pharmacy, and we have to learn to activate the capacity of how the body actually assimilates nutrients. I remember actually this past dry fast, there was a certain stage in it where I felt like I was drinking the water in the air. My lungs were literally transforming the water from the air into fluids for my body. It was the most remarkable thing. I had never experienced something like that before. So, I heard stories actually of a Breatharian who was a Breatharian for a while, about 3 years, 4 years, and he would actually activate the body to create nutrients through sun gazing, but activating the nostrils, the hair nostrils, that actually translated that information to start activating the creation of the nutrients and minerals that the body has the ability to create. So I mean, I can go into all kinds of stuff about that, but yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Just going back, thank you for your okay. I really love that you touch deep on your own experience. Yeah, I mean, all I can speak to is my experience. I'm also a 6'3" in human design, right? So I'm not, although I love teaching, I'm really, the most you're going to get from me is just me sharing what I've done and how I've experienced things, right? And that's how you're going to experience the majority from any 6, actually. Anyone who's a 6, it's best to just share your experience. Inner Flow had a question about meditation. Okay, I'll go back up. If there's more questions, say what's up. And say hello if I haven't said hello. Apparently there's another question on meditation. I will find it. Sorry for missing it. Many times in meditation, I've got a very heavily feeling like a weight being pushed on me, and after I end up feeling much worse. This made only my meditation when guided. Yeah, okay. Well, you could be more specific a little bit on where the heaviness is coming. But to be honest, it doesn't matter. And I would just point you to some of my meditations on my YouTube, where I go through what's called the awareness method. So the awareness method is something I created through an assimilation of many teachings, many different practices that I teach individually. I've taught in groups, but I like to do it individually for it to really activate. And then often there'll be a transmission of energy that occurs with that too. But essentially the meditation is a very step-by-step process to work on dissolving any form of density within your being, right? So anything we feel that is uncomfortable, be it weight, density, an emotion, a thought form, a belief structure, or anything that's holding weight in our consciousness, we have the potential to dissolve that. And the way in which that's dissolved is by us giving it our undivided focused attention and start working on it like a laser surgery. That's essentially what this method does. So I went into this in the last live. I don't want to go into it again. But it's just recognizing I guess we can go into it in a very simple way, like right now, in the sense that if any of you are feeling any sort of density or weight in your body, a simple practice in this moment would just be to close your eyes and go into that. So if you look at it like a ball of energy, right? Often that's what it is. First you have to identify where it is, right? So if you say you're thinking of somebody and you had an argument or something like that, and then you think of them, and then you feel into where is there that energy in the body. It may be very obvious. Sometimes you need to kind of really sink into it and work into it, look for the subtleties, right? And there may not be anything there either, because there's no actual charge. Maybe it's just you thinking of something that doesn't actually matter. So when you go into it and you start to actually bring all of your focus and attention in there, and you're sinking into the layers, it's like an onion ball. You're sinking into the layers of that energy. You'll start to notice right away it'll start to move. It'll start to oscillate. It may even start to become lighter. It may actually get worse before it gets lighter, right? So you may feel it get more intense and dense. But as you continue to focus on it, and most importantly, feel all the potential sensations. So it's like you're in rapid fire, acknowledging every possible sensation that's there. You don't care about what it is. You don't care where it's from. It doesn't matter what the memory, where it's connected to, what you think about it. You're only just silently being with every aspect of that arising energy and that rising feeling. And as that continues, you'll notice it will start to move. Often what it does, it starts to move up through the top of the head. You may find it release. You may find it dissipate through the body, right? So I'm working something right now because I can feel it in my heart. Sometimes I pick up on the groups I'm working, or the person I'm doing it with, so I'll feel it with them. So you'll feel it in the heart, and it starts to kind of oscillate up, right? And so what you're doing is you're basically aligning yourself with it so that the energy feels safe, just like a child. It's just like someone crying. You don't give them advice, you just hug them. You be with them, you're silent, you give them space, you let them cry. That's what you're doing with yourself, with the energies and the arising feelings and things that arise within the body. So as that's done, perpetually, right? It's a continual, like, very focused process. That's when you start to feel, sometimes you feel like a pop, right? Sometimes you feel it start to move, right? You feel it up, it's up in the head now, comes out the top of the head. Sometimes it just starts to dissolve, and then it's gone. So it takes, the reason I don't love doing it in groups is because it's so individual, right? We want to usually do this individually, so we actually see, like, okay, what are the nuances of this? Because there's many nuances to it. One of the clear ones, as we're sitting with this, is dissolving and relaxing your focus. Relax. So as much as we're dialed in, there's also a relaxation of the focus, where the energy can get infinitely large, kilometers large, infinitely large, the universe large in every direction, but you're so relaxed with it and you're focused on it, right? There's nothing too big for you to handle. There's nothing too strong, too dense. You're not at the mercy of anything. That's what I'm pointing to here, in the sense of the coming into the relaxation with yourself. Because you are the container by which everything is held within, and you are also everything that manifests within the container, and the space within the container. You are all of it. So if you are all of it, then there's nothing to fear in that sense, and this is how we transmute things. This is how we very quickly transmute, like you're saying, okay, I feel weight. Because that's what's happening. You go about your whole day, have all these things that maybe you haven't dealt with, unfinished business in terms of emotions or circumstances, relationships. So then you go into meditation, and all of a sudden, boom, hits you like a fucking ton of bricks, because it's all right there. It's like, this is what I've been asking you to look at all day. Right? So that's why it's important. Every night meditate, every night meditate, every night meditate, every night resolve what you got to resolve. Don't linger it in, don't carry it on to the next day. You know, deal with it. And you're not dealing with it in this, like, you know, you're just being very gentle and compassionate with yourself, exactly as I just described. I hope that makes sense. Let me know if that makes sense, what I've just described. Frank Yang, when he's referring to the 360 perspective, have you experienced that state? Yes. So there's different levels to what that is. In a certain sense, in knowing that you are all and nothing, and you're just right in between the two of those, there is an interconnectivity with everything. So there's a natural intuition that is felt and experienced everywhere. And the awareness or consciousness, like you have eyes in the back of your head, kind of does happen. It's not like you literally see, although I was just listening to someone who's she's on the Breatharian path, and she was saying part of the Breatharian path, the self-autonomous path, is actually to stop sleeping as well. So you don't sleep, you don't eat, you don't drink. It's very advanced. But one of the things that was being experienced by one of the women was she would describe that she would be backing up in her car, and she wouldn't have to look out the mirror because she could see what was behind her. And so that would be an example of the more siddhic, or siddhi, which is a reference term for, in the yoga culture, for superpower, essentially. And the siddhi is the activation of, like, an omnipresent vision, right? So that's a more concrete example of how that can evolve. But it starts by the recognition that, yeah, if you are all, you are connected to all, you will have a very clear sense of awareness of yourself, right? And the reality is, we always have that. It's like when you're, I don't know, just chilling and you feel like someone's looking at you, you're feeling the sense of them, right? So the feeling sense of ourselves is always really there. It's just that when there's more of a stateless energy or no mind, then it's just more accessible. And then the ever deepening of that is what I'm essentially assuming would continue, because I'm I still look out of my rear view mirror. But to be honest, even when I say that, I could probably say that that's still habitual, because the reality is, a lot of times when I'm doing things, when I'm driving and I don't feel like I need to look, is because I just sense it. And you do it because of fear, or the body's habit, or the tendency, or just the common sense. We don't need to, we can have some sort of humility, but the potential is limitless, I guess is what I'm saying. And even for me, is a never-ending process of deepening, right? An enlightened person says to someone that in the current lifetime they would not attain self-realization in respect to fate, destiny, karma. Is that a way to... Is there a... So you're basically saying so an enlightened teacher is saying that somebody cannot attain self-realization. So firstly, don't listen to that teacher, first and foremost. Second, at least for that piece, because anyone has the capacity, anyone who's even considering the term self-realization has the capacity to realize. Secondly, self-realization is the most natural, fundamental, foundational aspect of reality. It is the beginning of eternal life. So to say that someone is not going to be able to, blah, 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 it's possible, but like, what is the purpose of entertaining that for somebody? There is more like deeper aspects to this, more detailed aspects of this that are affiliated with the more Kelonic science, freedom teachings perspective, where somebody could go on the path of dark fall, or the fallen path, right? Where they have defected from the original Christic blueprint, and they have gotten to a place where their template, their energy is so damaged that they will not be able to move through their original ascension. This is a real far off path. Like, you got to be really off the deep end for that to occur, right? So in my perspective, if you're even considering like enlightenment, awakening, true bioregenesis, like, what is the purpose of coming to some sort of perception like, oh, I can't be enlightened, I won't be able to awaken. You know what I mean? It's like, there's unless you're getting such a clear insight within your own being, like you literally have come into communion with your higher self, and your higher self says, like, where you're at now, it's not in the cards for you. You know what I mean? But firstly, there's so many layers to it, there's so many levels, right? So what I'm speaking to now is just like one level into a whole other can of worms. It's a very complex topic, but I don't know. I wouldn't be listening to someone who's speaking that garbage, right? It's not in respect to fate, destiny, karma. Well, like I said, if somebody is even considering it, then how could that be the case? It's like when you taste the fruit, you can't untaste it. So if you're even considering self-realization, it means because you've tasted the fruit of what that is, you're just not stabilized in it yet. If you're still in the questioning, am I awakening or can I awaken? It's because you haven't stabilized in it yet, right? But boy, like, what? I don't know, man. Some teachers, bro. It feels more body-based than mind-based, like my body becomes extremely heavy. Yeah. Well, I just want to make sure that inner flow. But what you said was also very insightful. Just confused why my body gets so heavy. Well, I hope you practice what I just explained when we were doing it. Yeah, if you didn't, then we just wasted some time there. But second, you can just go and do the meditation on my YouTube, because don't think about the stuff. Trying to think about why you feel heavy is useless. Actually explore the heaviness. Explore what is happening. Not thinking about why it's happening, what's the purpose of it, where did it come from, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't matter. What does it matter? What does it change if the speed in which things will change of you intellectually knowing why someone's there versus actually doing the technique is like worlds apart, right? So I'm assuming I'm saying this because I'm assuming you didn't do it, or you didn't. I mean, it wasn't like the most well guided thing. So I would say just go on YouTube and do the practice, right? Because to dissolve, the method that I'm describing can dissolve anything. If you have something that's more physical, meaning like you have a physical ailment, right? It's like what I started earlier today. We talked about my ankle, and I had all the practices and stuff. Yeah, you got to do the physical practices to help, because now that physical ailment has manifested from an energetic buildup to emotional to mental to physical buildup now. So doing this laser surgery can dissolve it. It's going to take potentially longer, and it may require other practices to support it. But if it's still in the energetic domain, right? If it's still being felt as an energy, as emotion, then it's far easier to dissolve it. And anything can be. So whatever is charged, you got a relationship on your mind, you got a topic, you got some perception, or like you said, you don't even know what it's there. It just feels heavy. Well, it's to be explored. It's to be explored. That energy is to be explored. That's why it's there. The only reason for something to be there is because it's well, not even a reason. It's just there. So what else to focus on than that? So if we recognize that focusing on it is not focusing on the appearance of the weight or the appearance of the density, it's focusing ever so deeply through the onion layers on the source of what it is, which is the absolute source of all, right? God source, the original spark. And as we get to that, and as we can see that density as that spark, this is how miracles healing happen. It's like, Jesus healing the leper, that's what's being done. This is exactly what's being done. Not seeing the leper or the leprosy, seeing the spark of God. I'm seeing the source. I'm seeing myself and the love for myself. And because I see the love for myself, boom, dissolves. That's what happens. So it doesn't matter what it is. I don't care what it is, and you shouldn't care either. It doesn't matter. And you mentioned after was there's no such thing as inner child. Exactly. So if there's no such thing as inner child, then there's no such thing as a reason as to why weight is there. There's no such thing as a reason as to why a trauma is in your life repeating itself, or why a relationship. All the reasonings are relative, right? So we can go on forever to try and figure it out, or we can actually just deal with it, right? And often dealing with it is bringing a deep compassion and a compassion to the validity of something that's present for us. Right, so it's not to say that we can't talk about it, or we can't journal about it or do things, but it's like if we really want to work with it, if we really want to come to a place where it maybe is not there, this weight or this density or this uncomfortable nature, then we do the work, we do the practice. Okay. Can anyone attain self-realization independently of their karma? Once Frank said that after Awaken, people could not care to do shadow work. If they neglect that, would they have after death unfinished business? Well, to be honest, Frank, in my view, is a bit in the honeymoon phase of his awakening. So when I've spoken to this directly about him and me and like what I went through. So it's something I would speak to him directly. It's not like I'm calling him out or anything. But what I mean by the honeymoon is that there is a perpetual speaking to all the non-dual absolute realities of things, and he's very proficient at it. He's way better than me, I would say. He's very proficient in how he can describe certain things. But the reality is that's only the beginning, right? Which is still very rare. Like we're speaking like 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million even. Of it's probably 1 in a million now. A lot more people. But that's really just the beginning, because there's a lot of integration that happens after that, and part of the integration is actually coming into the true nature of love. Not all the ideas we have about love, but the true nature of love. And so that is inclusive of morality. It's inclusive of healing trauma. It's inclusive of many of those things, because there are absolutely realized beings that, I've spoken to this before. Genghis Khan was an absolute realized being. There's 2 separate traditions and documentation that speaks to that. And what did he? He's worse than Hitler. He killed how many people, right? There's many other beings in the modern era, teachers, who are enlightened beings who end up doing really off things or all kinds of stuff. There is never a level that we get to that humility and compassion and an honest look at where we're at in regards to our ethical morality is not going to be useful. It's true when Frank says that it's not a requirement for a true awakening. That is true. You do not need to be a nice person to awaken, 100%, right? But we're in a time where a lot of that is changing, meaning it's not changing the fact that it's not a requirement, but it's changing the fact of how are we actually going to navigate ourselves forward now? How are we going to live as an awakened being, right? That's the difference. So there is still integration to occur. I'm still underway with it. It's been a bit longer for me. Frank is. There's many other people I've noticed. It's still very rare, but it's a possibility for everyone. I've spoken to this because of tools like various transmission tools, Rasa being one of them, Kaylonic Science. There's many other non-dual teachers speaking to this and having results with their students and the people. It's a possibility for all of us, but 100% that integration and the deepening. The thing is okay. What I'll speak to, and what I feel Frank is also speaking to, is that shadow work is like it's like instantaneous. My previous teacher Ramanji would give the example or the phrase. It's like the brakes are off. That's how it is. That's how I experience it. The brakes are off. There's nothing. your mind is gone. The sense of lower self is gone. So there isn't this sense of being able to stop things. You can't stop the shadow work. It's just happening. You're coming into circumstances and situations, and yes, karma, that is being resolved, but in real time. Like, when I speak to this awareness practice, this practice becomes an ever-present reality where you're doing it in real time. Yes, it becomes way more powerful when you like sit and really focus, but you could say on one end, on another end, it almost doesn't matter sometimes, because life will just handle you anyways. It's just you're just in this perpetual purification. That's essentially what happens. So yes, on some level, shadow work is dissolved, because everything is shadow work. Everything you're doing is a humbling back into yourself now, because everything is yourself. So why would you want to be the Genghis Khan? Why would, if you had any sort of clarity within yourself, you would just naturally come back into alignment. But the reality is, biochemical and physical trauma is a very serious topic. It's something, like I said, when you have a physical ailment, like a scar or something like that, these are why practices like what I'm speaking to about fasting and all that, it does become very important at a certain stage, because it's the only way you're really going to be able to heal those physical ailments and get into the depth of those various traumas that are held in the body, right? It's going to come up anyway. But to make things more joyful and move in a more fluid process, to use various other practices, that's still going to be a reality. It's just so different, and that's where I definitely know what Frank is speaking to in that regard. But no, certainly there is definitely things that will continue to heal, and I know for myself, I have become a way more gentle and softer and compassionate person than I was even a year ago, right? But yet the statelessness of no mind is still unchanging. It's still a mountain-like peace. Even back then, it's still a mountain-like peace. I was just a little bit more rough around the edges. That's all I can say. And I still am in some regard, right? Highly recommend to book yourself one-on-one. Oh, thanks, Henny. Okay. Can Breatharian be sustainable in this time matrix? That's a really good question. I'll get into that. Thanks for the advice. Yeah, I guess I've been afraid of diving deeper. Yeah, of course. You're always going to be afraid if it's really, it feels really dense, right? So, that's why, like you said, you're digging the guidance stuff. So some of my guided stuff is good. But there's really nothing to be afraid of, to be honest, It's like always knowing I'm going to have to deal with it at some point. So it's better now. Thanks for being here. Yes. Dark avatars. Yep. Okay. So, is Breatharian sustainable in this time matrix? It wasn't. It wasn't always, as you know, and that's why you're probably asking it. It's in the Freedom Teachings in specific ways, and I'm actually going through that old workshop again about, actually for the first time this workshop, where she was speaking to the dynamics of how we assimilate energy and why we have become eaters here and consumers here for a very long time. And that is related to a lot of different energetic aspects, mainly how our cells assimilate light and radiation, because essentially Breatharianism is you're assimilating the radiation from the sun, from dark matter, from the elements. Everything is being assimilated the most subtle levels, right? You don't even need sun gazing. You can be in a dark room, but you're assimilating the smallest amounts of light radiation. So the body, we're still in that process of bioregenesis where the body has to sustain itself. Now at the same time, most of what was being spoken there, 10, 15, 20 years ago in the Freedom Teachings, in my view, has changed now. Not just because it's a farther time period, we're beyond that now, but because much of what they're speaking to about the common, like what everybody thinks about what a Breatharian would look like deathly ill, or not being able to sustain themselves and like blah, blah, blah. That's often much of what they would share. They would say, okay, well, if people were just go to Breatharian now, they may look deathly, or they would, all these things. So in my experience of coming across many who are or claim to be Breatharian, mainly through the internet, because there's not so many of them, there are some that there is an offness feel to them. I've spoken to this already, right? Being a Breatharian doesn't mean you're truly awakened, right? Being a Breatharian doesn't mean enlightenment. Breatharian is one aspect to the path. So you could have a Breatharian that again, is still kind of mixed up in a lot of stuff, isn't really tapped into certain levels. Of course, they're going to be far more advanced than most people, but it doesn't mean everything is balanced. So that's where for myself, I'm very mindful about this, because I do, just like you, and that's why you're asking, know about the aspects of how we have assimilated and can assimilate energies from places that aren't necessarily conducive to our eternal path. So if we become Breatharians too early and we are pulling energy from places or in ways that isn't really in alignment with the eternal Christ, then sure, it's not really that great of a benefit to be Breatharian. That's why, of course, it has to be a natural process. And two, coming back to the whole deathly ill thing, the ones at least that I've resonated with, or individuals that I've connected to that are on this path, they certainly do not look deathly ill. If anything, they look better than the majority of people I know. So sure, there could be other elements of the energetics and within the time matrix that maybe are not conducive to things. But I feel like that's a really clear telltale sign. I've seen some of the yogis and all that may not look so great, at all. Or other beings that just, reflect certain behavior that isn't, is questionable. So we have to look at the full picture, I think. And I don't necessarily have a clear answer to that, because firstly, there is no updates right now from the Freedom Teachings about where we're at. I've heard from different people in Keylontic community, some who still think that, no, we can't be Breatharian, but yet when you look at their eating patterns or you look at their overall, well-being and health, there are some questions to bring up as to why they're saying that, and maybe it's just that's their own projection, however advanced on the spiritual or unseen side that they may be. And on the other side, in the community, I've spoken to people who have or are already on the path of a Breatharian pranic living, and have had clear communication with their higher self or guidance inwardly that is navigating them in that direction. And that's where I feel myself to be. So yeah, that's what I can say to it, right? I'm constantly in a place of checking myself to make sure that everything is in a holistic sense of balance. And like I went to in the last live, we're not pushing pendulums too far so that we're wiping back. That can happen in many different places and in many different ways. But again, if we just come back to recognizing that the physical is a representation of the all, and so if we are looking good and feeling good, and the vitality and our energy levels and what we're doing feels in a balanced space, in a grounded space, because that's the key, right? People often equate eating to being grounded. Oh, I gotta eat I gotta ground myself with some food. That's not my experience any longer with that. I don't necessarily agree that that's the definition of grounding. Being grounded is having a full, balanced awareness and perception of the dimensional field that you are currently perceiving. So if we're in D3 and we are perceiving and in the sensational experience in a balanced way of all of our surroundings, all of our environment, all of what we are experiencing here and now, that's what it means to be grounded. So for me, I am far more grounded when I'm usually on liquids, or I'm eating very less, or I'm in a real clear space about the balanced form of my consumption. Going to eat a big cooked meal of quinoa just makes me feel lethargic and dense. That doesn't mean I'm grounded. Do we get what I'm saying here? So that has to be reconfigured. It's the same way with people with saying with food, it's like, oh, my body just wanted that. Well, are you sure your body wanted that? Or was it the parasites or the candida or your emotions or yada, yada, yada that actually wanted that? And then we're translating in the form of saying, oh, my body just wanted that nourishment or something like that. I mean, sure. And who am I to say? But again, we have to be honest with ourselves about what we're saying there, right? So yeah. I'm just gonna catch up here. I hope that answers. That was a great question. That brought up a lot of good stuff there. Oh, no more questions. Everyone's just nicely listening. So if there's more questions or topics or whatever we can get into, we're getting into a long one again. But I enjoy these. So yeah, almost 2 hours again. That's nice. So if you're coming in late, I mean, obviously, rewatching this would be nice. It'd be so nice if someone could timestamp these, but I know this is a lot to rewatch, and I'm not going to be probably rewatching all of this. But I tried on the 3 hour. I'm like, yeah, there's so many good topics, but not many people are going to go 3 hours. And plus, You can't watch on Instagram in like triple 2x or whatever. So I think I'm going to upload them both on YouTube, so at least we can go 2x, and then you can scroll through or whatever. But yeah, you know, we went into so many topics today. We went to just the detox breatharian topic, detoxing from all kinds of stuff, various forms of addictions. We went to the sexual energy topic, the golden rule and how it's a supreme teaching. We went into all types of forms of authentic awakening and true enlightenment. You know, Frank Yang made an appearance, at least, you know, the topic of him and his conversations. He has some great ways of explaining things. What else did we get into? Oh, the awareness method. If you want to book a session on that, please do. It's probably my greatest gift, my greatest creation in forms of like a method to do and experience what I'm speaking to in a very simple format, right? Not complex at all. So yeah. You should take a paper and pen. Yeah, that's exactly what I thought of doing before this, but, you know, just didn't happen. Take a pen and write down time. Yeah, that's exactly what I should do next time. Or if someone wants to do it. How do I get better at holding higher dimensional frequency and stabilizing? Am I going to save this live? Yes, I'm going to upload. So how do we go about stabilizing in higher dimensional frequency? Well, we're just consistent with our practices, right? It's like, well, what brings us to those frequency states? We have to look at that first. If we look at our life and we look at what we engage in, I don't know how many times in my experience that I journaled, like, my routine or what I would like to do today, or what are the best options of joyful things that I could experience, or my practices, or like I could think of, I probably journaled that like a few thousand times over the years. Like all the way, I remember I used to have a daily routine practice journal where I had everything categorized, like my yoga, my meditations, the music I'm listening to, the foods that I ate, and I fucking tracked that shit. I didn't last that long off the time because it was just too much, but it was like so intense. And then even now, I still, from time to time, like I'll like, you know, I'll just write out like all the things that I enjoy doing, all the things that I do all the time. Walk in nature, go for bike rides, you know, my breath work and meditations, and just communing with my higher nature and connecting to the everything and all, and writing, you know, doing lives, connecting people one-on-one, like just all the things. And like, what better way to take inventory of what's working than to write it down, reflect on it, and then just keep doing that same thing, right? Like that's how we continue to remain where we'd like to be. Is we recognize that we don't just do practices until we get somewhere and then we stop all the practices. Like sure, there's phases of honeymoon, and I've been there, and I continue to be in spaces like that where there's certain practices that I just don't need anymore. You know, I don't need to do a long meditation to activate something. I could do it in an instant, but yet meditation is still very joyful, so I can still do it. Like, things shift, yes. Though, as I mentioned before, when we're speaking, like, you know, when a master is teaching something or bringing up a teaching, they're describing the reality, but also a practice. So this is where things become very intuitive, right? Like, we have to go through the phases where we're disciplined and we're humbled to specific practices that we've been guided to, that we've looked at, the teacher's given it, a friend, or we've intuitively just come into it. We have to be diligent and disciplined and consistent. But as we start to actually abide in truth, in who we are, in the higher frequency ranges, things start to really mesh and mold, because, as I mentioned, the most advanced of practices are often descriptions of reality, right? Meaning, this is what's actually real. So we're doing a practice to remember what's actually happening already. Like the golden rule, be kind to people, because you don't know it yet, but these people are actually you. So you best be kind to them, because they are you. You are being nice to yourself. You understand? So golden rule is a description of what actually is, like everyone is yourself, but it's a practice. So depending on the frequency range you're at, you're gonna understand it at whatever degree, whatever level that I've just described there, right? So we have to be consistent. We have to be consistent until the practice has become an aspect of our being, right? Like, we meditate until meditation is everything. Everything's a meditation. We are being meditated now. right? We go and do our nature practices, right? Until we recognize, oh, I am nature. So I'm not doing no nature practice. I am nature. I am constantly giving back. Like I was in the waterfall yesterday, and I spoke to this in an old video where I talked about how like often we want to go into nature to be healed. But we have to remember, like, as we heal, we're healing nature. So when we're in nature, it's not just us receiving, and we're receiving, yes, but we're cycling our energy back in. So I was in the waterfall, and I was receiving the beautiful gratitude and the healing waters all over my body, but I was sending the frequency of love and compassion and clarity back into the water to heal that water, if it requires it, if it wants to receive it, right? So you're creating a communion, you're creating a cyclical relationship, an energetic exchange that's never ending, that's eternal, infinite. You see? So that's how we come into a consistent space of frequency. And we're doing the practices that are not escaping things to get us to some place that we inevitably have to come back down to deal with. We're doing practices like exactly what we spoke of before, right? Someone was asking, how do I deal with this weight? Wanting to know the reasoning, wanting to get a mental idea, which is great, but often that mental idea is the addictive tendency. We want to know, we want the mind to have certainty. That's addictive. So you get the certainty, but you haven't actually dealt with the weight of that energy. So we have to practice. We have to go into the meditations. We have to dive into the practice, engage it directly. And then we reap the rewards. Hope that's clear. Being breathed as you breathe is my favorite. Yeah, that's beautiful. Annie, look into call in your Buddha in your Buddhist technique. They are not guides, though they are aspect of you in other dimensions. What are your thoughts on fallbacks and loop cycles of things you're working on? How to keep consistent? Well, remember, like, cycles are not meant to be broken. They're meant to be oscillated to a degree where it fizzles out. It's like if you're on a spiral staircase, there's no point in which the staircase breaks. So you're never going to break a cycle. You're going to continue to oscillate to that cycle so that it's oscillating to such a degree where it's going so fast that it disappears. That's the practice. So that's where discipline and compassion are equally important. They're one and the same. So we stay disciplined and focused on our practice, but we're compassionate for the 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We're compassionate for the fact that the cycle, it doesn't just disappear. It comes back in smaller and smaller forms as we stay diligent. Right? Everything, the food, the sex, like the being not so nice to somebody, being like whatever, like all of those cycles continue, and they continue in smaller forms. The more we learn, the more we're learning, we're actually implementing, right? The more we're actually in practice, in engaged practice, because that will slow down your perception of time so that you can deal with things before they smack you over the head, right? Before they blindside you. That's essentially the purpose of spiritual practice. If you don't have spiritual practice, you can still progress. That's called you could just go through the path of devotion. Just be devotional to everything that approaches you in life. You don't need to sit on any meditation cushion if you didn't want to. You could just do that, and you're just going to have to face everything in everyday life. That's why both are equally important in my view. In the yogic system, that's bhakti, and then you have kriya and jnana and karma and hatha and all the forms of yoga. They all represent different forms of the same practice. Yeah, exactly. One second. How to directly communicate with those other dimensions? Me still look for the hint. Well, you have to. I would say, well, on a simple note, is deepening the meditation. Often when people are asking this, they're not meditating enough. If you meditate enough and you're focusing on the depth of yourself, you're not interested in anything that's coming and going, all the movements of this and that. You're focused on, I want to connect to the deepest aspect of myself. Not even the deepest. I want to connect to myself. Who and what am I actually? And focusing upon that sense of self first and foremost, not looking at all the thoughts and feelings and sensations that are coming and moving, but focusing on that sense of self and starting to stabilize in that consistent, rock-like, mountain-like sense of self. When that starts to stay consistent, you're going to be able to connect to any layer of yourself, because you're getting to the most fundamental source of your being, and from that, all levels of your higher self, all your nature is going to reveal in time, right? So if that's the focus, then you're going to recognize that connecting to your higher self or to guides or the Buddhas and all this shit, it's not this extraordinary experience. It's the most ordinary thing. It's basically like recognizing that the words that are being spoken out of your mouth, the thoughts you're thinking in your mind, as you're coming to this level of clarity and peace, is your higher self. It's you who's speaking. That's what we have to start trusting in, right? So to develop that trust, we actually have to come to experience it. Experience the knowing of self. And as that experience and knowing of self is there, then the clarity of knowing that, I'm not going to like listen to my higher self. It's literally I'm speaking from that place as that. To me, that's much more useful than trying to connect to something else, right? It's safer too, to be honest. But on top of that, I would go straight also to original Kalantic freedom teaching workshops that can break down layers of the soul, layers of the spirit, layers of the anatomy of God, layers of yourself, and get those original direct transmissions from that, because that will help you connect to that as well. Of course, there's going to be like other beings. Of course, there's going to be council energies we can connect to. Of course, there's going to be potentially guides or what's being referred to as the floating Buddhas. But like, what's more important? That's the way I look at it, right? Go straight to the source. Go straight for gold. That if we go straight for gold, then the other things will start to release and open. Where do I find KS stuff? Yeah, of course, you can't find anything. It's all taken down. You don't find it anywhere. You'll find other new teachers teaching it, but in my opinion, it's best to get it from the original database, which I have. So people can send me messages, and I don't. Firstly, I'm not here to like resell that material, because it's not my material to resell. Of course, there's other teachers repackaging it and teaching it as their own, which they can do what they like. I think going straight to the original transmissions is better. Having guidance is helpful too, but the stuff is there. So I'm not doing that. So the way I engage it usually is, obviously Annie, we've talked for a long time, so there's like a layer of trust there, and I feel willing that you're going to respect the material, and then I'll share it, because I've had people in the past just want access to it, and then there's just real dicey stuff, and plus it's taken down for a reason on the internet. There's a real interesting dynamic with what's going on there. So I don't just share this out with everyone, but we're here, and that's what I have to say about that. But yeah, so like I said, go straight for gold. But before that type of practice and all the workshops and stuff, like I said, if you like what I'm sharing, what I'm saying to is it can be simple. It can be far more simple even than like looking at the workshops, or even having an understanding of the layers of your higher self or anything like that. Keep it simple. Focus on that clear sense of self that's beyond all movements. Who is that, right? If we can understand that we have the entirety of the movements of our thoughts and our feelings and our sensations and everything that is observable, because you can observe it when you meditate, you observe all these things. Who is observing that? Okay, it's myself. Okay, let's focus on that then. What is the feeling of myself? It's the sense I am. It's the sense of self we feel in the heart of hearts. So let's focus our attention upon that. Give it our undivided focus and attention. That's what it means to seek God. To seek God, or to seek God source, is not through a myriad of complex ideas and perspectives and endless things. It's to seek God through our own individual subjective reality. And if we can come to see that feeling sense I am is the fundamental origination of all movements of thoughts and ideas and dimensions and chakras and energies and etc., 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 then let's look at that first and foremost. Let that be the primary focus of our attention. And if that becomes the primary focus of attention, then all of the complexities of the induction sequence of our manifestation grid and the expansiveness of our anatomy and the many dimensional layers of the universe and creation and co-creation, all of it, that will all be much more manageable to understand. You will get so much more out of exploring all of that than if you did when you don't even know really who you are or where you are, and you're trying to explore the complexities of all these things, and it ends up becoming just a lot more concepts, great concepts, but concepts nonetheless, right? And what we're speaking to when it comes to realizing who we truly are is beyond concepts. So yeah, this is really great. Some really great stuff. Really great stuff. I mean, boy. Okay, so this question, what I'm getting from claircognizance, clairvoyance is from where? Source? Well, why not instead look at it this way? Everything that arises, be it a thought, an idea, an experience, a circumstance, a sensation, is a spontaneous arising that is completely whole and complete within itself. Essentially, yes, the absolute source, but unnameable, because as soon as we name it, we can't really grasp it. So that's what we're getting to. Everything that arises is an arising of this unspeakable absolute, this absolute God source, whatever these terms. Everything. So the random thought that I want to drink, the perception of what's going to happen tomorrow, the epic dream that you had with all this symbology, is all equally it as anything else is equally it. So if we begin to perceive existence in this way, what starts to happen is that alignment, that frequency that you're coming into, where everything is viewed essentially as perfect, as the source, as the absolute, then within the relative experience, what seemingly is, say, closer to the source, like you're saying, omnipresence, all-knowing, being able to see past and future, having complete understanding of all synchronicity and symbology, knowing everything before it happens, essentially, without expecting anything of that. All of the array of things that you're speaking to, that begins to essentially happen far more. Yeah. It starts to happen all the time. Ollie just came in. So like we were talking about, Ollie Kinane, at least, there's two Ollies. What we were speaking about the other day was you're just in epiphany all the time. Epiphany is nonstop. It never ends. And it's like synchronicity. When you start experiencing synchronicity, everything's a big deal. Oh, I saw a number. Oh, I saw this. Oh my God, it's happening everywhere. But what happens? It starts happening once a week, every couple days, once a day, once a few hours, once every couple times an hour, a couple times a minute, all the time. It's all the time. But what's happening? You're not thinking anything of it. There's no perception about it. It's a complete acceptance. Everything is equal to everything else. So essentially what we're describing here is the perfect practice. This is how everyone can be enlightened like this. Everything that arises, we are absolutely loving it as if it's our greatest love. Like you have a child, you have a puppy, you have something you love so much. You love it so dearly and so deeply, like it's the most mind-blowing love you can possibly imagine. And in the same exact moment that occurs, you're also completely forgetting about it. You're completely dissolving all ideas you have about it, all levels of importance, all levels of that has meaning, it has purpose, it is everything you could possibly imagine, everything, it's also simultaneously dissolved and gone. See if that can be a practice. Let's all do this, including me. We can all go out about our day and our moments and just everything is that. We are absolutely adoring and loving every moment of our experience with such intensity, and simultaneously completely dissolving all ounces of needing to hold on to it, attach to it, think anything of it, think it's important, think it has meaning, think it has purpose, it has connection to anything else. Because remember, everything is completely whole and complete exactly as it is. So it doesn't need to connect to anything else to become better. Often what we want to do when we have an experience, we want to connect it to something. Oh, this is because this happened. And it has meaning because of this. Oh, this is happening because I was supposed to do this. And this. We're connecting the dots because this, we're basically saying that this doesn't have value unless it has meaning with this. This person isn't important unless they are this type of person or they mean this to me. I can't love them because, oh, I don't know them, and they're a stranger, or they're not. It's just this endless requirement. But if we instead will love everything exactly as it is and simultaneously think nothing of it, that's enlightenment to me. That's how all the things you're talking about, clairaudience and claircognizance and knowing the symbology, being all-knowing, all of that, it'll happen all the time. But it's not going to happen all the time because you don't need it all the time. It's going to happen in the moments it's required. It's going to be in all these different combinations. You're going to have all these epiphanies, all these things happening all the time. You're not going to be worried about what's going to happen in the next moment. You're not going to be worried about what just happened because you're always in it. So what about that? So what about that? That's the most important thing we've spoken about all night, in my view. That's the greatest practice that we can all practice. Because it's the golden rule, essentially. So break that down into a practice. Actually engage that for like a day, 2 days, for eternal amount of time, but like just to be practical for the next like day, 2 days, 3 days. See how can that be practiced consistently. So let's break this down today, like right now, because I'm doing this like in real time. So we just outlined a very specific way in which this practice can be explored, in the sense that we're engaging all love for all things, and then an all destruction. It's like the complete. It's like the most beautiful paradoxical experience. Everything is completely loved yet completely dissolved. How are we exploring this? Well, we're recognizing where we're running towards something or running away from something else in any moment, in any way, right? Where we're also potentially dragging on ideas and concepts that have just passed and trying to bring them forward as if they mean something now in this moment. Trying to hold on to them, Meaning, oh, someone said this to me, and that, there's this, and then reflect. It's not okay. You can reflect, and that could be part of this practice, where many times throughout the day, as many times as possible, we take a minute or two just to reflect, to see what are the things that are seemingly too important or too little important, like things that we're putting on a pedestal or things we're pushing down to numb. That would be another way to explore this, right? Because the things we're pushing on the pedestal, those are the things that there is an imbalanced sense of love for them. There's more of a personal love. There's an identification that's emerging with that love. On the other end, something we're numbing, this is something that we're purposely disregarding and destroying because we don't want to deal with it, but yet it's still there. Right? So everything is, that's the purpose of meditation, is we're bringing ourselves back to see what is actually here. When we go about our life and we're constantly distracted, it's very easy to not actually look at what is right here, what is directly in our field of consciousness. And oftentimes, it could be completely silent. You think you got to do all this shit, but you don't have to do a damn thing. You're silent. Just chill out. Look at the birds. Just enjoy yourself. It's like a constant to-do list, you know? So I don't want to get into too much to-do list on that, because it can be right. I'm not worried, I'm just confused as to where it comes from. But what you said, it just dropped it. It feels like it doesn't really care, just use it when it comes and when it's necessary. Exactly, right? It naturally arises as the absolute God source, you're appreciating it, loving it, then it's dissolved and it's gone. You're not thinking anything of it. And then that's where you recognize you don't need to know where it is, because it's all it. It's all from the absolute source of all. And of course you can get into the details of dimensionalization and the relative aspects of the science of exactly within the anatomy of how things are manifesting. But to be honest, the majority of people don't need to know any of that, or they don't need to know it to the degree in which they think the mind really wants it, because it wants certainty, because it's afraid of itself. It's afraid of completely dissolving into the all, into the unspeakable, the unknowable. Right? So we put the suit on, the metal suit, the armor of concepts. You know, just have all these concepts, and we're protected by concepts, thinking we're awakened. But often you're awakened with concepts. You know what I mean? So it's important for it to be integrated. So there's a bunch of posts here from Ali. Okay, I've been on my journey of retention for over a year now. Okay, so there was another question on here. Sexual energy release, waste of quanta, okay. So I'm just going to make a quick note, like we went into a long piece on semen retention and sexual energy. I could reiterate a couple pieces, but I'm not going to go into all of it again. Also, on the post you made recently, you mentioned how you should have knowledge about what's going on with the physical realm. I've been struggling to find authentic resources. I guess you're speaking of like, not like conspiracy, but like Earth history and stuff. Yeah, well, you know, people are asking about KS, it's Kaylonic Science. They have, in my view, the best documentation of our forbidden history. So the forbidden history is often what's going to be the missing piece in conspiracy land. You know, most conspiracy theorists don't really have any idea as to the true Earth history or the dynamics at play here. So they often look like wackos, and most people who are even looking to consider conspiracies can't connect the dots, because you can't connect it without the history. So if you're just looking at all these like crazy theories of all these like dark people or things that are happening, it's like, well, if there's no connection to why that has come about or why that is currently here, of course you're going to think it's wacko. Of course you're going to, the conspiracy theorists are all going to look fucking stupid, because they're not really speaking to anything that's has any substance. They're just throwing about all these crazy things that makes them look crazy, and doesn't really provide any actual education, true wisdom. So when we bring into account the Earth history, forbidden history, which is billions of years long, we can actually start to get to know, like, oh yeah, like it makes sense why we're in such a shithole on this planet if there's been wars that have been happening for millions and millions of years. Millions and millions of years is a very long time. And so if we're all of a sudden thinking like, oh, the new age is here, we're going to jump into 5D, everything's going to be all great. I mean, it will be individually, but we're seeing collectively it's not so great right now. You know, we're seeing a lot of different things. I mean, things are also splitting and other things are happening, but there's a lot of shit on the planet that's not nice, and we have to be real about that. There's a lot of darkness, a lot of shit, a lot of pain and suffering, right? So, so if we think like millions and millions of years, you know, it's just going to kind of go away on its own, that's not a great balanced way of looking at things, right? So yeah, I can provide resources for that if you send me a message. There's a lot of stuff online. Well, it's not. It's a mixed bag. That's what I'll say about stuff. But yeah, I can provide some stuff. So people were asking to reiterate about the semen retention and the sexual energy. What could I say that's new from before? I mean, I went in my whole account of my whole run with semen retention and how it affected my spiritual abilities, how it affected my physical. It certainly can be an energy drain. We can get to levels where we can mitigate the energy drain to a certain amount. It does apply to females as well, because we're more focused on the orgasm than the semen, the retention, because retaining the seed is a world of difference than orgasming and still retaining the seed. Not retaining the seed and having an orgasm but still retaining the seed, world of difference. But not orgasming at all is even a higher state, and essentially, in my view, the supreme way. It's not that you're not experiencing union of sexual nature, but orgasm isn't necessarily equating to union. That's important, right? When we return to the source of being and can blend the field with another being in that exchange, that doesn't necessarily mean an orgasm has to be present. Obviously, I know the Kahlonic system speaks to orgasm, which is the original term for that, and it's basically when the energetic fields are blending, and usually when you have the proper coding between partners that are blending, right? So you're not just blending with anyone; you're blending with an opposite of your incarnate wheel. So if you're the 6 on the incarnate wheel, you're blending with 12 or 3 and 6, or 3 and 9, or you're blending with a certain layer, a certain dimensional level of one of your twins, because there's many different twins, right? So that's a really complex topic, but essentially, yeah, the only way that's going to happen is if it's with the correct person. That's why, when you go back to religious scriptures that speak to no sex before marriage and stuff, and obviously everyone's rebelled against that in the West, but much of my journey has actually brought me back to through not doing that, obviously, through recognizing that I understand what's being spoken to there. There's a lot of distortions in how that's being presented, but if we understand that, coming into a true spiritual marriage with a being that shares the same coding, know that it is correct for you because you've done the work, they've done the work, and there's a clear knowing, well, then then there can be an engagement. And it's the same as I was speaking to on the topic of Carezza, right? Carezza being the more modern form of non-orgasmic sex that fosters much deeper love and higher union, essentially speaking very similar to the sacred sex teachings of the Kahlonic system. The Carezza teaching is, if you're wanting to experience a deep sense of love with someone, you're only going to do that with a certain person. You're not going to be able to do, how can you have really slow, meaningful, almost like a meditation like sex with someone that you've just met, or someone that you're just basically lusting over? It's just not going to happen, or it's just much more difficult. You're not going to feel the same towards them. So that's what I'll add to what I shared before, but I would recommend to go back and watch, because I had a long journey with that, and I've learned a lot, and I still am learning a lot. Very connected to food. When we're fasting, sex energy is not moving much, not going to move. All that energy is siphoning inwards because you're practicing one of the deepest forms of self-love, right? You're letting all your organs come to rest and fucking take a break, and they're loving you for it. And now all your sexual energy is moving up through your body, healing all your organs, moving into your brain, moving through your aura fields. It feels so joyful. You're having sex with everything. You're having sex with nature. You're having sex with platonic friends, but it's not the same. It's not the same at all. And yeah, we have to look at, just the nature of, the orgasmic energy. It's an interesting one. Just rewiring that. That whole concept. By same coding, you're talking about twin flame, yeah. But not just one twin flame. There's many, right? There's layers, right? There's layers of twin flames, dependent on various levels of the soul body and your anatomy, and the anatomy of God. You can have a Cosmea twin, right, which is going to be different than an Akasha twin, and it's just really complex, which I'm still learning too. But the majority of people talking about twins, they're likely talking about just soul, other incarnates in their soul group, right? So if you have 12 incarnates, like I said, usually you're going to be on the crisscross. So in a final incarnation, when you're moving up into a higher level, you're going to be at level, usually the woman's at 6, man is at 12, if you have a clock. Right, so that'll be considered a twin, but that's not necessarily the same level of some of these higher forms of twin flames, where it's final incarnation, and that twin dynamic is actually the doorway, to ascension, where both of you are never coming back, right? Which this is the time for a lot of that is happening, right? So I can't be really the one to say what's happening for who, but that's for each of us to start to explore. Amenti Project at Nod is a resource I found, and yeah, it's okay. A lot of the stuff they took down on that website, though. It's not much. There's still some stuff there. It's some basic level, good entry level, good summaries on some of the stuff. But But like I said, I have the database. I share it with certain people who I feel, connected to, or I feel like there's a actual application of the knowledge. What I'm thinking of doing, because I have a lot of databases for a lot of stuff, so what I'm thinking is for those on Patreon, I will start doing that. It's not that I care to really make money on this, because it's not necessarily a lot of it is my content, some of it isn't, some is a mix. It's a huge database of resources, but that would be probably the closest way that I would start organizing that with people, of those who want to access certain things. But just we'll talk, send me a message. I know some of you have. Yes, to depart the planet. Thank you. Yeah. It's funny. It's a very complex topic, though, that one. I'm still understanding it, and even going through all the previous workshop material, there's just a lot of different topics, and then even the more Tantri Aura, Tantri Asia, which of course a lot of people are not on board with. Some people are. Tantri Asia, Tantri Aura, coupling and twinning is Cosmea level twinning, and that's a kind of whole other bag of worms. The thing, what I will say about just like all this knowledge we're speaking to about just like these very higher levels of relationships, it is just so many of the ideals of relationships and stuff like that really start to change in these levels, right? And just the dynamics of sex. I mean, I don't know what the age of people are here, but I know like when I speak to like elders or teachers or people I've connected to who are usually a bit older, like 50 and above maybe, which is still young if we're living like the length of time that we think we're going to be living, some of us, but they often have a much more mature viewpoint on sex than a lot of like younger, I'm a younger teacher, a lot of us we're kind of still in that like world of all this stuff about the importance of sex. You're seeing the tantric community is all big on it, but when you're in these older spaces, especially those who are very spiritually inclined, like they don't speak to sex in this like glamorous way anymore. Obviously we could say, okay, maybe like the romance or the heat is fizzled out, but I don't think it's that. I think there's actually a recognition of coming to what is really desirable, which is the depth of peace, the depth of true intimacy and true loving connection. So like this whole like orgasmic, blissful chasing, all that like craziness with like the sex talk is just shifted. And that's why like when I speak to things like Karetsa or these sacred sex teachings, you're not talking about like positions and like having multiple orgasms. Like that's just not the conversation. You're talking about higher energetic dynamics, cultivation of the energy for a deep sense of compassion and love. Like it's a whole other like chat, it's just very different. Take out the sex and then you'll see if that's a great, it's a great piece, because it can be, if you just fill the mind with, many things. If the mind's not already filled with many things regarding sex, right? So, yeah. Oh, wow, it's a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. A lot of good stuff, though. I hope these are valuable. I trust they are. People are still here asking, but if you're just coming in, then obviously there's a lot of previous stuff that you can go in and watch. Boy, we went into so many great topics. These lives are so valuable. So we've really co-created a nice space. Don't have too much else to say. I feel my energies are completing now. What I would really appreciate is if you did find value in this, is to share it and then maybe tag me in the share in a story. And then, if everyone does it, then I probably won't reshare all of them. But I like to reshare a good amount of when people tag me and stuff. But sometimes it's just like a bunch of people tagging the same quote, and then it's like 10 stories of the same quote. So I try and avoid that. But yeah, like if you can share, tag your friends in this, that would be really nice. Oh, nice. Someone just messaged me about a vaccine article. I shouldn't have said that. The V article that I wrote on my website, ayp.life. I think it gives one of the more balanced perspectives on the topic. Obviously, I spoke to it today a bit, but it's still a topic. I don't like to talk about it much, but you see it everywhere, so it's like ongoing topic. But it's just really like a nice perspective, and it's a combined effort with some other people that I've shared conversations with about it, just about how to rest in peace within the chaos of it all, no matter where you find yourself on it or where you find family members on it or whatever. So that's on my website, ayp.life. But yeah, back to the tagging, share it, tag me, tag friends, do what you need to do. When I repost it, that's when it'll be, because I will repost this, and then if you guys, leave a comment, like, save it, press the save, do whatever you can to boost the algorithm, because this is the stuff that is worthwhile of being around on Instagram. There's a lot of things that are worthwhile, but there's a lot of noise too. So yeah, I'm saving this live. Yep. All right, cool. I think that's good. This is nice. I love you all, and enjoy your night. Send me a message if you want to connect further. And I don't know. Oh, my next live will be on Thursday with a friend. It'll be mainly on detox. We're doing it through her networks or whatever. So you guys will be able to see that on detox and fasting and all that. Yeah. Deep love, source flow to all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your night.